Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reviewing some tweets from various commentators, various thinkers within the Western world. And these have been people who I think in the past few years have been pretty optimistic, and things really started to take a turn during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're seeing that with the current Judeo-Islamic war of 2023, that people are becoming less and less optimistic. And I think it's really important to see what the various thinkers, what the various intellectuals within the West think about things. So here we have Gad Saad, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I've seen him a few times, but he's of Jewish descent. And so he's very clearly on the side of Israel in this conflict. But let's see what he has to say. You're not going to like this tweet, so turn away if you are likely to be triggered. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a fighter for Western values and liberties. I'm a dogged defender of science, reason, and common sense. I must say, though, that I'm unsure that the West can recover from its multi-front civilizational suicide. Yes, I've talked about these issues for decades. I wrote a book about it, but the past few weeks have crystallized the extent to which the problem has become intractable. It will be a long and ultimately bloody demise, and the West will be the first society in recorded history to fully self-implode due to its parasitic ideological rapture. It is a gargantuan Greek tragedy that will shape the future of humanity. This is not hyperbole. Your grandchildren will pay a very high price for your progressive arrogance rooted in the pursuit of unicornia that only exists in the recesses of deeply flawed, parasitized minds. And so let's see what some other people are saying on this post. So this person is saying, I agree 100% that the West is being destroyed from an internal parasitic enemy, but I don't agree with the characterization that it's just a progressive arrogance. This agenda over a century old and is completely bipartisan, going back to the installation of the Federal Reserve and the use of America as the piggy bank, $35 trillion in debt, and superpower plays to go across the world, topple governments with CIA coups, install central banks and compromise leaders, arm and radicalize certain locals into hating us, and then use those radicals to fuel and justify forever wars and more conquests until they reach their eventual goal of a global government, global currency, and world domination under one authority. They've also expressed how they want a large portion of the world population to perish before they finalize that control. Both sides, liberals and conservatives, have facilitated this destruction of the West and its values. I think America was officially taken over by the cult when JFK was assassinated, with each president that came after being just one side of the same coin. It's been a steep decline ever since, which you can see the data on in this website below. I'm curious about this. I'll come back to this later, maybe for another video, what happened in 1971. If I had to guess, what he's going to say is, I talked about this in my classes as well, which was that productivity and compensation decoupled around the early 1970s. So I think that's what he's going to go over. There's a number of other trends and statistics that really in the early 1970s, things started to get really bad. America has been intentionally turned into a global ticking time bomb, and when it really collapses, along with the dollar, so does everything else. That's the real Great Reset, and their new world order, Phoenix, will rise from the ashes. Okay, so interesting things being said here. Gad Saad, I do think he's right in some sense, but I also agree with the second poster that he's really mistaken progressivism to be the kind of the body of the Hydra, where you're seeing a multi-front, what he's talking about here, a multi-front civilizational suicide. And he's saying that one of those heads, the progressive head, is kind of the leader, the one in charge. It's the body. I don't think it's the body. I think it's one of the heads, obviously. And what inversionism was talking about here, he was talking about what is the body, what is actually leading, moving all of these various heads of the Hydra. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see that Gad Saad, someone who's, I would consider a very well-spoken person, very competent thinker, for him to say something like this, it should be concerning that he has this belief that humanity is not going to be doing particularly well, particularly America. And I would say, as goes America, as goes the world, at least in modern times, considering how interdependent, interconnected the entire world is, on America. That's why you see a lot of countries pivoting away from America, is because America is not particularly stable right now, and they don't want to be dependent on that instability. We saw that with the 2007, 2008 crisis as well, where a lot of countries face problems because of incompetence, corruption within America. Okay, so Brett Weinstein is another one of those thinkers that I highly respect. He's an intellectual within the West, and let's see what he has to say. He, up until a few years ago, I would say he was actually very optimistic. Things that happened at, what was it, Evergreen College or whatever. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he faced some problems from progressives within the college because they wanted white people off campus for a day. And yes, that is something that's something that occurs in the late 2000s. That's people just, you can be kicked off of college campuses because of the color of your skin. That's something that happens. But yes, he is saying here that the West is self-destructing and the implications are even worse than they initially sound. The world before the West evolved was barbaric, lineages constantly violently displacing each other, but bloody as that mode was, humanity could plod along like that indefinitely. That is no longer the case. Suicide of the West will not just return humanity to full-time, all-consuming barbarism, it will almost certainly end our species in short order. The technology at our disposal is simply too powerful for a world without a basic agreement to prefer peaceful competition over endless war and genocide. Okay, so he's talking about we have weapons capable, nuclear weapons capable of completely wiping humanity out. And so it's not just a matter of tribal clan conflict where people throw stones at each other and spears and things like that, but we can actually wipe out all of civilization. Recognition of this stark but obvious fact, coupled with the dawning recognition that the West is too far gone to save. Okay, so we have two intellectuals here. Both of them, I would say, would be considered a part of the prior intellectual dark web, which no one talks about anymore because they really fractured. But both of them are now coming out and saying that the West is too far gone to save. Okay? And the fact that it's too far gone to save should, he says, narrow our focus. Everything depends on our reviving, recreating, resurrecting, rediscovering, or reinventing the West before we forget what it was. Anything that doesn't stave off disaster in the present or contribute to that admittedly daunting objective is a waste of effort in the foreseeable future. So just shocking to see what some of these people are saying. Is there anything else I'll say here? Okay, so another person worth hearing their perspective on is Kim Iverson here. And she's another geopolitical commentator like myself. And like, really, I would say Gad Saad and Brett Weinstein. The only thing I will say is historically, anytime there's been a more liberal change in cultural values, conservatives genuinely feel it's the end of civil society and dangerous. The question is, can we historically point to any one time in history besides stories of Sodom and Gomorrah when liberalization of a society led to a catastrophe? Has this ever caused true collapse? In history, what seems to cause collapse if society is focused too much on war and expansion? Oh, I think she has this completely wrong here. A return to fundamental religious ideology, Iran, ISIS, or squashing freedom. I don't think there's historically a society that fell because people became too liberal. Maybe we'd be the first. Wow, this is I like Kim Iverson to a large extent, but sometimes she has takes that are just completely off the mark here. So Rome expanded and allowed too many people of too many different cultures and backgrounds to be a part of the country, and the founding population of the Roman Empire and the prior Roman Republic, they did not reproduce enough to maintain their civilization, and so they just fractured. And this happens very frequently where people just, they expand their borders, they're extremely successful, but they're not reproducing enough, and so the other populations that are encompassed within their borders just fracture and break off. And so that's what happened with the Roman Empire. There were just not enough Romans left in the Roman Empire, and there were a lot of other populations. And I would say that was progressive values. They were allowing people who were not ethnically Roman to become Roman citizens, and or at the very least, yes, some were Roman citizens. If they weren't Roman citizens, they were still allowed within the Roman Empire. And at a certain point, there was just not enough of the Roman population, people who believed in Roman culture, to maintain this civilization. Germany, I think that's the best example of progressivism destroying a civilization. After World War I, the Weimar Republic was just a horrific thing that completely destroyed the German economy. Horrendous things happening with transitions and trans people, heinous sexual acts, things like that occurring within Germany. And Nazi Germany was a response to that progressive decline of civilization. People obviously think that was not the correct response to it, but that was the response that occurred because of the progressive collapse of civilization, the liberalization of a society. So that, I mean, I'm surprised she brought this up, because Germany is probably the best somewhat modern day example of liberalization of a society destroying the society, because and part of that liberalization was obviously because of the ending of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, things like that. But yes, it was obviously, you can directly see cause and effect there, that the liberalization of Germany led to the Nazi response, and then the entire world gathered together to defeat Nazi Germany. And so, yeah, I would say liberalization of society, direct cause there. And you could say that the liberalization of society was itself caused by the loss of World War I and the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. But I mean, yes, if you're talking about, I mean, it's one step removed, I guess you could say, because you could say Nazi Germany was the direct reason for collapse of Germany. But the reason for Nazi Germany existing was because of liberalization of society. So really off the mark there. And again, USSR, I have talked about this in prior videos, but I think it was very similar to the Roman Empire. They expanded, they were extremely successful. However, their population was largely non-Russian, because the Russian population itself, which was supposed to make up the core of the USSR, the culture of the USSR, they were not populating, they were not reproducing fast enough to control the various stretches of their territory. And so once the USSR faced some problems, they collapsed into ethnic enclaves again. So they were, I would say they were a multicultural society, very similar to modern America or the Roman Empire before its collapse. And what we've seen is that when multicultural societies with ethnic enclaves face serious problems, the countries just fracture into these ethnic enclaves. And so that's what happened in the Roman Empire. And that is what happened with the USSR. So I would say that's a very clear example of liberalization of society, where multiculturalism is a very core tenet of modern liberalism. So again, really off her mark here with the examples. A return to fundamental religious ideology. ISIS is very clearly a creation of the Western world, of Israel and the United States. So I don't think anyone really likes ISIS. So I don't really have anything to say about them. They were only really allowed to exist because America toppled Iraq, and they toppled or tried to topple Syria. And so ISIS just, it literally only exists because of America, whether they created it directly or not, which I do think they created it directly. And then Iran is a weird one to put here, because Iran is actually very successful, given the fact that America has been bullying it for so long. Like, they figured out ways of getting around, circumventing American sanctions. So I don't think any of her examples mean what they think it means. But again, if Kim ever sees this, I do love your channel. I watch your videos all the time. I just think you're way off the mark here, and that all of your examples point to the exact opposite. Okay, so I think that's a good stopping point for this video. I just really wanted to emphasize here that it's unrecoverable. I don't know how else to put it, and I've talked about this really for a decade at this point. And before this past year, I've been talking about it very quietly with only a few friends, but it's pretty, I would say, self-evident at this point that the West does not have off-ramps. It does not have a way to really recover in any meaningful way from what's going on. And part of that is simply the win conditions of the United States don't allow it to, because it needs to exploit populaces both domestically and abroad, and extract resources domestically and abroad. And to do that, it needs to create chaos and disorder throughout the world. And that's not the world that the rest of the world wants to see. And so this situation is completely untenable. And so I've talked about this before. I feel like I'm being like, I'm a lobbyist for being an expat, but I do think that leaving the United States, if you have the opportunity, is a really good idea at this point, because I do think the United States is going to go the way of places like USSR, of Roman Empire. You're already seeing people split into ethnic enclaves, particularly with the rise of online work. They have more of an opportunity to not really engage with other people. There's already online echo chambers. I mean, there's going to be a lot of difficulties with a breaking up of a country like America, just because you do have rural conservatives and then urban liberals. But I do think that it's going to happen in one way, shape, or form at this point. And you can see here that various intellectuals who, even if you don't like them, they're highly credentialed, and they're telling you the exact same thing that I'm telling you. And I'm also pretty highly credentialed. And we're all saying that America is facing problems that it just does not have a way of solving. So if you found this video to be informative, please give us a thumbs up on both YouTube and Rumble. And we would encourage you to move over to Rumble if at all possible. YouTube has been shadow banning us. They've been suppressing us in the algorithm. It's very self-evident from one video to another that we ended up getting suppressed in the algorithm pretty much completely. And I know algorithms, so I understand that that's exactly what happened. Even if you don't know algorithms, if you're looking at the analytics for your channel, you can see like when something like just changes, and it wasn't a change on my end, unfortunately. So yeah, that's what's happening. Please subscribe to our channel, and please leave us a comment in the comment box. I do always read them. I get them notifications directly to my phone most of the time. And thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.